school, not PHWA. You know what I mean? Yeah, we're the ones that sell water. Yes, they certainly do.
Member Burke,
Here.
Member Fig, Member Nast,
Here.
ex officio Member Nordahl, Vice Chair Schnapp, Chair Spiegel.
You're on. Talk.
I'm on top. No, I was to put the timer on. It's okay. Yeah, I got that on. Okay, I move to approve the agenda. Do I have a second?
You're approved. I'll second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? 2, 3. 3-0. Okay. Consent items. Does anyone want to take something out? No? Okay. I move to approve the consent items.
Second.
Starting to feel like I, never mind. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? 3-0. Okay. Our business items, Mr. Filifana.
Right. Good afternoon, Board. The first item is the update for the month of June, and on the water treatment plant for PHWA. During this reporting period, the overall Port Hueneme Water Agency demand averaged 3.6 million gallons per day, which equates out to approximately 10.8 acre feet per day, which is slightly higher than the last month, which was 3.4 million gallons per day. The facility was operated in membrane production mode, except as noted below, with United Water Conservation District supplying 77.6% and Cayugas Municipal Water District supplying 22.4% of the water demand during this period. PHWA water continues to meet all state and federal regulatory standards. The silt density index SDI sample twice a day averaged 1.58, which is an indication of the iron and manganese. The threshold is 3.0 for SDI, and there were 2 days this month that we were shut down out of the membrane mode, which were June 3rd and 4th. The rest of the month we operated with the membranes. The water supply allocation update. We have a TEA allocation of 3,470 acre feet per year, and our current usage is 156 acre feet, so we're about halfway there. Cayuga's water supply project allocation 80%, or 1,850 acre feet. And you know, as far as any shortage at this time, we do not anticipate any water supply shortage for PHWA. However, as you all know, that the groundwater sustainability study is going on, and eventually they will develop a safe yield. And when that safe yield is developed, then the amount of water that each participant will be able to take is going to be less, and then eventually, it hasn't been determined as how we're going to ramp down. I think it may be a straight line, but we don't know yet. It hasn't been firmed up yet. But that is on the horizon. And again, PHWA has historically been maximizing United water allocation to protect our allowances, so that we can maximize those. August will be dark, so you can amend the report to say that the next PHWA board meeting will be scheduled for September 17th. And it's recommended that you just file and receive and file this report. Are there any questions?
Okay, thank you. Mr. Alikhan, the agreement for strategic planning services?
Thank you, Chair Spiegel, members of the board. If you recall, a couple months back, Director Fig asked us to inquire on the status of the strategic planning exercises. The Beach District went through their own strategic planning exercise in 2016. The city then followed up with their own strategic plan exercise in January and February of this year. The results from both those studies are in. Our plan all along was to have both agencies complete their own exercise, figure out what the priorities of their respective boards are, and then synthesize that data at the PHWA level, which is where we're at right now. I think this is a kind of an exciting time for this agency, and the scope that you have in front of you is designed to take the process to the next stage. So since both agencies have completed both of their strategic plan exercise, what we're ready for now is a water model to be done, which will evaluate several different options available to PHWA and figure out what's the most cost-effective means of providing quality water to both of our, or all of our agencies rather. And what water supply alternatives should PHWA pursue in the future? This is particularly important for reasons that Mr. Villafana just pointed out, and with the onset of the GSP, state water becoming increasingly expensive as it has become year over year. Developing a source that's local, sustainable, affordable, those are all going to be priorities. And in fact, those priorities were all things that were identified by both the City Council and also the Beach District Board as things that are important to them for any new water source. So I want to touch on a few key points in the scope in front of you. If I can turn your attention to page 15 of your packet, you'll see some charts at the top of the page, and if we can skip down to the middle of the page and start with step one. The first portion of the scope is a water supply model. So as I was stating a minute ago, the consultant would develop a water supply model that determines what our available sources of water are going to be, and then the cost thresholds for these different water supply alternatives, and what our future demands are going to be. The demand portion, I'll let the group know right now, is maybe going to be a little bit hard to determine for some of us. I know for the Beach District, with the onset of the Casa Serena being redeveloped, other developments in the harbor, maybe some businesses coming back, it may not be the kind of usage we've been seeing the last 8 or 9 years since the recession. we may see a pickup. I know similar things are happening in the city of Port Hueneme, maybe with some increased commercial development or hotels and whatnot. So future demands are going to be a big part of this water supply model, and it'll be staff's job to determine what is a reasonable amount of water we are going to need, say, 8, 10, 15 years out. That's going to be a major input for this model. The second one is stakeholder outreach. And when I say stakeholders, I mean the agencies that we interact with when it comes to our water supply, namely Cayugas Municipal Water District, United Water Conservation District, and the City of Oxnard. You may wonder, well, why is the City of Oxnard in there? And that's because, number one, they are our regional provider of wastewater treatment services. Number two, we are in what's called the three-party agreement, and some of you may have heard this term before. I'm going to get into this in our next agendized item. The three-party agreement is an agreement whereby the PHWA members in the City of Oxnard got together to avoid peaking charges from Metropolitan and Cayugas, and I'll go into detail more in a second. But the stakeholder outreach is the second portion of the scope, and the reason that's included is anytime you're doing strategic planning, you need to kind of determine which alternatives are actually feasible, and part of that is speaking to your neighbors, speaking to the people that you do business with, and figuring out, can something actually be done, or is this kind of a pipe dream, pardon the pun. From there, we go into step 3, which is project refinement, taking that list of projects down, whittling it down to just a few items, and then in step 4, figuring out a core set of people who are going to be on the forefront of any top priority or alternative. So figuring out, well, who are the exact staff and who's going to lead this effort. And then lastly is, how are we going to get there? Giving a 2, 3, 4, 5-year plan on how we're going to actually implement the selected strategy. Overall, the scope of work is $38,000. We don't have it currently programmed into a budget since that budget is still being developed, excuse me. However, in the budget that we are developing, Mr. Villafana and I, along with Mr. McDonald, we will program this item if it's approved in the proposed budget. And if there are any questions of the board, we can take those now.
So, does this model here for the strategic planning, does it mirror what the Channel Islands Beach Community District did in any way?
No, we're at a point where the only thing that we've done that's similar is both parties being the city and the beach district, have done the clicker exercise and the priority setting. We're at a point now where neither agency has progressed upon. So we're at the point now where we kind of combine forces and we do the modeling. We have not done a similar exercise, if that's what you're asking.
So if this is then the combined force, then there possibly could be like parallel things that each agency individually will do, but this is the consolidated effort of the water agency to get the ball rolling here.
Yeah, I mean, this analysis and this scope doesn't preclude the city from, going about its own studies or its own, feasibility plans. I know your Public Works Director has shared with me some projects that the city is undertaking in the future. What this project looks at is the demands of all the PHWA member agencies, including the Navy, and tries to figure out what's the most affordable way to provide quality water to these agencies in the long term. But it doesn't look at individual projects that each member agency may undertake.
Okay. So it just helps us keep the ball rolling and taking a look at, future projections and demands. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, precisely.
Okay, good.
All right, if that's,
Well,
I didn't see your hand, I'm sorry.
uh,
I see your fingers.
Did the priority grouping of both organizations kind of match up, or I guess more specifically, where did DSAL come
Without the data in front of me, Director Nast, I couldn't tell you. In fact, I regret not bringing the results from both studies with me. In our study, I can speak to the Beach District one since that's the one I've kind of read more closely. But desal was maybe a 5th or 6th ranked priority just because of the sheer cost. Even if you were brackish desal in this region is, to even get it permitted is kind of difficult. And then even if you were able to do that,
10-year lead time, that's-
yeah, even if you were to drill into the groundwater table in this very location where we're standing, you're not really doing brackish desal. You're pretty much doing ocean desal because what you're sucking up is essentially ocean water. The cost effectiveness of that, I think, was a major deterrent for it not being ranked higher. And Director Spiegel, you were part of that process, and I was not quite on board yet. Maybe you can speak to maybe why desal wasn't ranked higher.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Yeah, so when we did the strategic planning exercise with KEH in 2016, this was prior to Director Nast's tenure and mine as well. The question was, why wasn't desal ranked higher? And I had pointed to the fact that cost was a major consideration, and I don't know if you recall that also being the case.
To be quite honest with you, without my papers in front of me with my little notes, I couldn't be exact, except that we took it very seriously and we prioritized. It just happened that that was at the end, at the time.
Yeah, we also discussed using recycle, and I was wondering, you know, all of these, the criteria happens to change as the further we go into the drought, the more desal looks like, and plus also improvements in energy use also brings down the cost of desal. But I just think we might want to re-rack the numbers maybe a year from now, just based upon what the criteria is of how much groundwater we have.
Yeah, and this board will have the opportunity to make their opinions known to the consultant as well. Even though we've done the prioritizing at each of our respective board levels, the PHWA board will be able to comment on some of their priorities as well. And I just want to mention that what did come as a high priority in terms of cost effectiveness was groundwater recharge. Mm-hmm. And when you evaluate groundwater recharge compared to any alternative out there, we already have the infrastructure to convey water from north of the 101 freeway down to the beach area. And leveraging existing infrastructure is probably the most cost-effective means of getting good quality, affordable water here. The challenge becomes, how do we divert more water onto the spreading grounds in Satakoy to recharge the basin? How do we get farm users out on Wainimi Road to stop pumping water out of the ground to prevent more seawater intrusion? And there's cost-effective means of doing both of those things. Cost-effective when related to desal. That doesn't mean desal will be off the, out of the question entirely. I mean, I wholeheartedly agree with you that it's only becoming more price effective every day, especially as the cost of energy hopefully declines over time, or at least the processes become more efficient.
Okay, I didn't want to get into the weeds, but thank you very much for the education.
Okay. Next item of water supply mix.
I think
So I think
if there was a
an
motion to
action.
approve.
Oh,
yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I move to approve the agreement.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Now we're 4-0. Okay, on our water supply mix approach, Mr. Alicon.
Thank you. Chair Spiegel, members of the board. This item was brought to our attention via Director Nast a couple months ago on a site visit at the PHWA facility back in March. We observed that maybe not all of the 20% of the Cayugas water that each member agency pays for is received in that exact proportion. And it's always been kind of an understanding that we got some mix of 80-20 that we'd all been paying for. However, it became apparent that a lot of that 20% of the Cayuga supply was indeed going to the Magoo reservoirs as you drive out to the base there. And the reason for that is they fill up their water tanks during the night when pumping charges are at their least expensive. Operationally, it makes a lot of sense. The Cayugas supply is intended to kick on whenever we have high demand. And that high demand is not happening during midday in the middle of summer when we would conventionally think we have high demands. Rather, it's happening at night when Magoo is filling up those water tanks. There's a few ways of addressing this, and the easy one would be for Magoo to adjust their operating of that reservoir, of when they fill it. That would be the easy solution. It wouldn't require any mixing tanks. It wouldn't require any sort of blending stations. It's really just an operational change that could very well solve this issue. In speaking at our managers meeting earlier this month with Director Nordahl and the Navy staff, they informed us that they would be changing their pumping operations to fill up during the day. And that was not in response to our request, but it's all the same because the reason they're doing that is Edison is changing when the cheap rate is going to be. Traditionally, that cheap rate has been at night. However, with the increase in solar production, the cheap energy now is during the middle of the day when solar production is at its highest. And the rate tariff for pumping is now going to be cheapest in the daytime, which is now when Magoo is going to be filling those reservoirs. That does solve this issue theoretically. However, there are some other challenges that we're going to need to work through before diving into this full steam. And so while this, for the most part, this would solve the issue, I think there's just a little bit more research we're going to have to do over the next 6 months before that changeover is made. And I'm going to go back to that three-party agreement I was speaking about a minute ago. With that three-party agreement, the reason it was instituted is to avoid peaking charges from Metropolitan and Cayugas. And these peaking charges are quite expensive. And what the agencies did on the coast here, namely PHWA and the city of Oxnard, is they got together. They said, we're going to combine our Cayugas allocation, and if we pool together, we can actually avoid any peaking charges from Met. And so we did that. However, the additional challenge that presents is if all the member agencies are peaking during the day for our normal domestic use, and then Magoo decides to also fill up during the day while domestic use is high, now we're like uber peaking. You know, we're really up there. And the challenge that presents is, can Oxnard actually support that much throughput if we're peaking that high? This was brought to my attention by my former general manager just a few days ago. This is a question worth inquiring with Oxnard staff, is seeing what is actually that gallons per minute that comes through that connection. When we receive state water, it's technically not coming through a Cayugas connection. It's coming from Cayugas routed through the city of Oxnard and then to the PHWA facility. That's how it's changing hands, so to speak, before it gets here. So my message on this item today is Magoo will be changing or plans to change their reservoir filling habits starting January 1, 2019. However, between now and then, staff will have to do some more research on if Magoo peaks while domestic use is also peaking, can Oxnard's interconnection support that much throughput? And so I'd like to revisit this discussion with the board at a later date once we have some more information.
I have a question here. So would it then be wise for us to take a look at when we're saying, I mean, we're just bringing the water in and sending it right out, correct? But if there's anything that we need to change in order to adjust, then what Magoo might, what the Navy might be doing. I don't know if there's anything we can do, but it kind of begs the question of could we maximize everything by each one maybe making some slight changes?
Yeah, that's a good question, Director Schnapp. I think the challenge becomes, short of building a reservoir and storing water there, short of that, you would have to create a marketing campaign to every domestic user out there saying only use water between here and here. And in practice, that's dang near impossible, as we all know. I mean, the Edison's actually been pretty good about that in terms of getting people, remember, only do laundry past 9 p.m. sort of campaigns. What you're suggesting is something along those lines. It's really challenging. I think where we're at right now is we need to see what has been our peak demand from all the PHWA users, maybe over the past year or 2 or 3 years. We have that data. Check and see how much Magoo is peaking at when they fill up their tanks in the middle of the night. Add those two together, see what that total is. Compare that number to what the total maximum throughput is for that Oxnard connection for Cayugas water, and see if we're below that threshold or above that threshold. And that, I think, is a cursory exercise that will inform this discussion.
Okay. So.
It's
File.
receive and file.
Yes,
Receive, yeah.
right, there's not an action even though it was on it. Okay. Board members' reports or comments? Bob?
Do you have anything to report?
Well, a report or a comment?
Well, no, I was just waiting to when we get to the place where we can recommend agendizing items. I do have some input there.
Okay.
Are we able to do that now?
Now? Yes, that's the next item.
Yeah. I don't, well, does anybody else have any comments before I start?
I do.
Okay.
Go.
This item most likely doesn't apply to the Port Hueneme Water Agency. All three entities, the base, the city, and Channel Islands Harbor area. But I attended a AWA Water Issues Committee meeting last month. Very good presentation there by this City of Ventura and a program that they have. And it's supported with grant funds as well as some local water agency funds for them in helping homeowners rebuild their front yards with drought-tolerant plants, succulents, et cetera. And they've gotten some marvelous results from this. It's not, by no means is the whole city doing this, but there's some very interesting work that's being done, and it's obviously going to be saving water in the long run. We're going to be needing to look for grants for us to be able to do something. And again, I'm not even sure if this is something that perhaps just the city of Hueneme, there's not a lot of front yards out of Channel Islands Harbor. So I don't think we need to worry about that area, but we do. And we have a lot of dry front yards as well. So perhaps there are opportunities for grants or money somewhere that may come to a water district that might not go as quickly to a city, or perhaps to a city. So I'd just like to raise that flag and get us thinking about that in the future. And I'll mention this probably in our city council meeting as well.
Okay. Would that be under, your report, but I was just wondering, would that also be something that you'd want to have on the agenda?
Nope.
No, okay.
Okay, I don't have anything. No.
Yes. Well, at this point, I don't either. And as an open forum, is there anybody who would like to speak in the audience?
Do we have the
Yes,
number 6 executive
Yes,
director?
our executive director is.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just two quick items. Mr. Villafana mentioned earlier that the City Council made a decision to go dark in August this year,
Yes.
which has been traditional here, although we did not do it last year. And along with that, in consultation with the Assistant Executive Director, Mr. Ali Khan, we have decided to also go dark for PHWA in August. We don't foresee anything time-sensitive that will need action prior to your regular meeting in September, which will be on Monday the 17th. If there is some unforeseen crisis or time-sensitive item that comes up, we'll contact you for a special meeting. But right now, our game plan is go dark in August, be back on Monday, September 17th for your next regular meeting. And then my only other item was, I mentioned last month that we are in the recruitment process now for the replacement of Steve Hickox. And that position closes Friday, July 27th, so a week from this Friday. Bill Avery with Avery & Associates Executive Recruitment Firm is handling that for us. It's a tough environment just because of the job market being very good, a lot of people having jobs now, and then especially in that area of water and wastewater, people with a lot of water and wastewater technical expertise, it's even tougher than other fields right now. But we're going to pursue finding the best person that we can. If we need to extend it a little bit, we will. And in the meantime, we have Mike Oakley, former City of Ventura, longtime Water Department Division employee. He has come back, as is allowed under CalPERS regulations, as a retired annuitant. So he's working about 27 or 28 hours a week for us, holding down the fort while we recruit for that permanent replacement. So we'll keep you posted as that goes forward, but as of right now, it closes on Friday the 27th of this month.
It's a hard market. How many applications have we received so far?
I honestly don't know that. We talked to Bill Avery last week, and we may have to make some adjustments to the, and Mr. Villafana's kind of giving me a smirk right now because he's been advocating for this for a while now, but we were looking for someone with water and wastewater experience if possible. What we're finding is that may be challenging. People tend to go down one track or another, either a water track or a wastewater track. So if we don't get good quality applicants by the 27th, we may make some modifications to the job brochure and the recruitment to focus more specifically on water. But right now, I honestly don't know the number that he has collected. It's been open for probably 3 weeks now, and they're doing a pretty aggressive outreach campaign, not just to the traditional city job sources, but to the organizations that focus specifically on water and wastewater professionals. So they're doing a pretty aggressive outreach.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Mr. City Manager, are you going to make the same report at the council meeting as well?
Yeah, I definitely can.
Okay.
Remind me if I forget at the end of the meeting, but.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chair Spiegel. Before I forget, Director Nast, I feel like he had a couple things he wanted to agendize. I don't know if we skipped over that before we.
Yeah, very quickly.
We're not there yet? I'm sorry.
Unless there was
Oh, is there anybody
additional
else that-
report.
No, okay. This goes back a couple of months, just listening to NPR on Friday, Science Fridays. There was a report on about how the city of Chicago had to actually close over 700 of its drinking fountains because of lead poisoning. And this isn't just an isolated incident. This applies to over 130 other municipalities. And so I immediately looked for where we sat in it, and there's like a model you can go up to, and we're not that bad as far as lead poisoning. But I wanted staff, and I know that they have a lot to do, but I wanted to get sort of a handle on what is our responsibility in us doing end of pipe, it's called end of pipe testing for lead. And this is mainly directed towards elementary schools because that's where the lead poisoning is the most lethal. So I also, it sort of went, it was on a back burner, and then I was looking at Oxnard's agenda for next week, and they're doing lead testing in their schools to the tune of 144,000. We at the district, I was just informed, only have one school involved. But I'm sure Port Hueneme has more than one elementary school that, and this really affects older schools that the active plumbing was put in somewhere around 1970. So I was hoping we could discuss that more and get a little bit more information on that during.
So the Hueneme School District would be a customer of the city,
Right.
not PHWA.
The board, the city, and we have to do it while school is still in session. Last month, we just completed our lead testing, and we've got good results. There were no issues with that, and I believe I made mention of that. I think I made mention of it at the last council meeting of that. So we are up to speed on that within the city of Port Hueneme.
Well, if I can make a recommendation, you don't want to hide good news. I would sort of like put those results out there for folks so that they know that we're on top of it.
All right, I'll look into a posting on our website.
Thank you. I guess we don't have to agendize it after all.
So, new business, anybody else? No? Okay.
Chair Spiegel, I'm sorry, I jumped the gun just a minute ago. I
Yes,
realized that.
I
I was
did-
still on to number 6 there
Then
before I
you're
asked for
there.
number 7. Let me just mention a few things that I think are worth noting here. We did have a meeting a week ago on July 9th with United Water Conservation District. Myself, along with the agency council, Mr. Green, were present, as were representatives from the Navy. The purpose of that discussion was to talk about the ownership of this agency's allocation. And what an allocation is how much water how much local groundwater you can get without suffering any sort of overage penalty. It is the position of each member agency of PHWA that we own our allocation. When we gave up our coastal wells and said, for the betterment of this groundwater basin, we're going to now pump inland, that we did not give up our allocation. We merely gave United the opportunity to pump on our behalf. And in fact, the Oxnard-Hueneme Pipeline Agreement states just that. The reason this is coming up now is because we're developing the groundwater sustainability plan. And in that groundwater sustainability plan, the way it gets developed is the Fox Canyon GMA looks at a proposal from the ag community and a proposal from the M&I community, and we've talked about this the last few months. And our proposal on the M&I side says the allocation holder of record belongs to each retail agency. Now, from United's perspective, that's problematic because they feel that they've been providing us water for so many years, and they've been exercising our allocation for that time, that therefore the allocation should therefore belong to them. And this is where it's kind of a rubbing point between us as the PHWA members and United Water Conservation District. And we've made that known for several months now. The purpose of that meeting was to try and come to some resolution or some middle ground language that can be included in the M&I proposal so that we can all sign on to it. And our hope is that if we can all sign on to the same M&I proposal, Fox Canyon will be more likely to include that language into the final adopted GSP. It's hopeful reasoning, but we're at least trying to make an honest and genuine effort to try and make it happen. So I thank Mr. Green for helping lead those discussions, and we've been trying to come to a compromise, and we hope to get there sometime soon. We'll report back to the board when we have some further development on that. I'm going to switch gears. Tomorrow is the AWA Water Issues Meeting. This is the same meeting that Director Berg was just referencing. Those meetings are, if you like to nerd out about water, it's really the best forum for it. So the room is kind of packed, so if you want to join, get there early. It starts at 7:30 a.m. You're out of there before 9 a.m. On July 18th, we have another M&I meeting. This is our monthly meeting that all the M&I users get together to refine that proposal I was just referring to. And I don't know how much refining there is left to do, but nonetheless, we keep continuing to hold those meetings until the GSP gets adopted. And lastly, on July 25th, the Fox Canyon GMA will be holding not only their regular meeting at 1:30, but they'll be having a pumping allocation workshop at 9 a.m. So if you feel like being in the Board of Supervisors chambers for an entire day, you can go to the GMA meeting at 9 a.m. and then again at 1:30, have lunch in between, and have a full day of GMA activities. So a lot of interesting things happening in the next 2 weeks. That's all.
All right, so back to the new business again. No new business for next, okay. And the open forum. Okay. Okay. At that point, we meet in September 17th at 4 p.m. So keep your sunscreen on, folks. It's going to be hot.